Hello and welcome once again to the Monster Sci-Fi Show. I am your host, The Monster. I'm back once more to give you some sci-fi news for this week. So, from my last podcast, I had talked about that I was going to Tampa for the Tampa Bay Comic-Con. Yeah, that didn't work out too well. Only because, one, money was tight, and two, I had to get my wife's car fixed, and it was very problematic. So we did get it resolved, and the money that we were going to use for the trip, we wound up going out to the movies, having dinner, having some good time. So I will be talking about finally watching Jurassic Park and Ant-Man, as I'm going to do a quick review on that on the next podcast. So it's going to be later this week that I'll do that. So it'll be two that's coming out. So in addition to this podcast. So what is also happening is that my laptop battery is completely shot. So I have to rely on my laptop charger in order for me to use my laptop to record this podcast while I'm doing at work. So lucky me, because I'm stupid and retarded, I forget my laptop charger, so I can't do a podcast. So how is it I'm doing a podcast while not using on my laptop? Well, one of the fundamentals of being a librarian is you're looking up information. And I came across something called Twisted Audio, in which I can record an audio program online, web-based, without having to download anything. So right now, what you're hearing is a different software that I'm using, but I do apologize if you hear kind of like these weird little noises in the background, or the air coming from the ceiling, because I have a bad location for where I'm doing this. But that's the only quiet spot that I could find to do this. So, turning something positive into negative? No, it's something turning negative into a positive. I got dyslexia right now. I'm going to be talking about a couple of things that are in the news. One sad passing, unfortunately, is Roddy Piper, wrestler extraordinaire, who I was not a wrestling fan, but I grew up in the 80s and was lucky enough to see kind of like the birth of WrestleMania, in which rock and roll was kind of mixed with wrestling. So you had Hulk Hogan and Mr. T fighting against Roddy Piper, and how he was bashing everything that was rock and roll. So Cyndi Lauper got involved, Tina Turner, Captain Lou Albano. So it was like this big thing back in the 80s that I was really kind of getting into this. And I remembered him always being the bad guy. The guy who would always, talk smack. But it was great to watch him. And he did make a transition into the movies. The best one was a movie called They Live by John Carpenter, which is one of my favorite shows. Not favorite shows, but my favorite movies that he's directed. And the classic line is that, he came... in this one scene, he came to chew gum and kick some ass, and he's all out of bubble gum. So that was a great line. And it's sad that he's left us so early. He was only 61, and I'm sorry that he has passed, because, again, a good character on for the WWE. Decent enough actor. I wish he could have done more. So, moving on. We finally get the long-awaited official release of the Deadpool trailer. So, after weeks of being promised since the Comic-Con that this was going to be shown finally, we finally have it. And for the most part, it's something different that I've seen with the cell phone footage, but what I like about it is more of the fact that you're going to treat this character seriously. Again, quiet spot. Not happening. So, we are going to get a more... Okay, so... apparently there's a 5-minute limit of recording time on this software. So I have to be cognizant of that as I'm recording and going along with this. So, going back to Deadpool, the fact that I'm happy that this is one being made. Two, that this is actually going to be, hopefully, something that Ryan Reynolds can actually regain his career back. Because again, Green Lantern was awful, R.I.P.D. was god awful, and considering that, he was gearing to do Deadpool for the longest, never knowing that this was going to ever happen, and now that we finally have it, and it's already, being done, it's coming out next year, it's very promising. So, as long as Marvel sticks to its guns, and again, this is not Marvel Disney, but Marvel for Sony, that owns the rights, I believe. Hence why we're getting the rated R version, which, it's fine. Not everything that Marvel produces has to be a PG-13 for a general audience. Just like Netflix and Daredevil, you did not have to have it as a PG-13. If you're going to go with the violence, let's go ahead and do the violence the right way. Hence why it's on Netflix and not on the regular channels, so forth. Alright, so the other thing that I want to talk about, and this kind of really, I want to believe that this is true. If you have seen Back to the Future 2, you know that Marty McFly in near, let's say, the first 20 minutes, he arrives into the future in which he has to escape from the bullies once more, but in the future he is riding on a hoverboard. And, there was a documentary on the making of Back to the Future 2 and how Robert Zemeckis talked about how, this is all real stuff and we used it for the movie and so forth. And of course, that was a big lie. Fine, because everyone wanted the hoverboards back then. Well, now, as of today, I think actually within the past 24 hours, Lexus, the car maker, has released something called their own hoverboard. And I've been looking at the YouTube video. For the most part, it kind of looks legit, unlike the hoverboard kind of commercial that came out about, I think, within the last year or so, which I was really insulted by the fact that they're bringing out the same hoverboard. They brought on Tony Hawk, who was a skateboarder enthusiast and a great skateboarder himself, and he's riding around this thing and he's doing all kind of tricks, and then I'm like, no, can't be real. And it wasn't real, but a lot of people believed it to be. So here we get another hoverboard, and this time it kind of looks legit. I don't know if that's the case. My only quandary, my problem with it is at one point, I guess because there's no friction, you're going to have to acclimate yourself to the board and how it feels. So at one point, the guy is jumping off the board because he's about to fall off, but the board kind of continues from the ground and kind of skims like this artificial pond. And then I'm thinking in my head, like in Back to the Future 2, hoverboards can't run on water without power. So I'm thinking, no, this can't be real. So I want to believe, just like Mulder wants to believe. But in this case, I really don't buy it. And considering there's only one, according to the press release, that it's no way they're going to be able to mass market this or bring down the cost, whatever the case is. But here's this video of everyone having fun with it. I don't know. Again, you'll have the link on my podcast, so if you're listening to this and you see that link, look at it, tell me what you think about it, but honestly, I don't buy it. Until I see one physically in my hand, that's all I can say about that. Alright, so it looks like we're coming up on another 5-minute break, which I'm going to have to pause for a moment. So what I'm going to talk about next is going to be a couple of things, but mainly on the graphic novel that I've been reading that my co-host, Mr. Gene, recommended. So just give me one quick second. Okay, so I'm back once again. I really hate this 5-minute breaks in the podcast. It's really... bleh. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is the graphic novel that I just finished reading. And those who know me know I don't read. Even though I'm a librarian, I don't read. My brain is really shot to hell because of me being on the computer so much has kind of wired or rewired my brain to be in like short snippets, so my attention span is really short. So it's really a telling of a good story if I get really hooked on something and cannot put it down. Saga is this book that is written by Brian K. Vaughan. And if you know Brian K. Vaughan, I think he's written a couple of Batman stories, but he's also famous for Y: The Last Man, which, again, I haven't even finished because I'm only halfway through the first book. But this book, Saga, as it's put it as being a space opera kind of Star Wars meets Game of Thrones meets Game of Thrones. I said Game of Thrones twice. Oh, God. I'm really tired. Star Wars meets Game of Thrones. That's basically it. That's the mashup. And for the most part, I would agree with that. Considering the beginnings of the story starts up with the birth of this child named Hazel, which is by the parents Alana and Marco. And right off the bat, you're plunged into this world that's nothing like you've seen before. Alana kind of has wings on her back, and Marco, the dad, has horns. And basically, they're enemies. Their races were enemies for the longest time. I think Alana was from... I'm forgetting the planet and the moon or who has what. But basically, it's a planet and the moon that were at war for years. And because it was becoming too expensive, they kind of put the war into other places so that it would continue going on. It was ridiculous. But basically, these two had fell in love. And we pick up the book, or the story in the very beginning, where their child is being born. And we get this kind of like piecemeal backstory every once in a while of how they met, why things are happening the way they are, and we kind of get the hint of the narration from the very beginning that it's Hazel talking about her parents and everything that's happened up to that point. So it's kind of a very interesting, very weird. I mean, one of the first things that I looked at, and right from the very cover, and because my friend Mr. Jean just dropped off the book to me right before he went to work, and I looked at it and I was like, is that thing breastfeeding? and sure enough, it's Hazel being breastfed, but you see the side profile, and I'm like, what the hell is this about? So again, once I got into it, I could not put it down. And it took me about 2 days to kind of really finish it. And I read about 18 books. So in this one massive graphic novel, about over 400 pages, I've read 18 issues of Saga. Now, there is a new one coming out, I believe September of this year, which I did request a galley copy, so I'm hoping to get that into my hands and continue doing another review on that. But I highly recommend this for you if you have not seen it, because it's really out there, but I enjoyed it because you didn't know what to expect, where the stories are going, where the characters were. I mean, it was a lot more involved than I thought it would be. And I saw myself getting really kind of caught up in the dialogue, and it's a lot of humor in this, and I really liked it a lot. So I do recommend you guys check out Saga for that. So, alright. So now we go pause this podcast once more and go do my closing remarks. So it's going to be another second. Okay, so I got nothing else really to talk about except for a couple of things. August 25th, I'm going to be doing a podcast for my Page 49 podcast, the one that I spun off, which I haven't really spun off much since then. But I wanted to do this for young adult books. I want to do that for more specifically towards libraries. So I'm looking at getting author Amy S. King, who actually came to my branch, who did a quick event And even though we didn't have, a great turnout because it was a last-minute event, I did enjoy her visit, and I wanted to talk to her about, her career, her books, and so forth. So I am reading one of her books, which, again, me with reading, I'm pushing myself to read at least her latest book. That's going to be Glory O'Brien's History of the Future. So that's what I'm currently reading. So August 25th is when I'm going to do the actual podcast, about 11 in the morning. Now, I'm not going to make this open to everyone, but if you want to, and if you know about Amy and you like her books, you have a question about what she writes, or anything that you want me to ask on your behalf, I'll be more than happy to do that for you. And if you do that, I might actually give out a prize. I don't know what that will be, but I'm looking to get a lot more participation into the podcast and make it interactive so that you're also involved, not just me, but we're all involved in this podcast. So what I'm looking at is for you to contribute. And how are you going to contribute? You can simply email me at monsterscifishow@gmail.com. You can send me a tweet on Monster. You can send me a tweet on Twitter with the Monster Sci-Fi Show with a Scifi handle. So, or you can post it on my Facebook page. The Monster Sci-Fi Show page is also listed there. So again, you can put it anywhere you like, whatever's comfortable, but I need to have your questions and responses to the podcast. Because again, I want that to be hopefully something that we can put towards my library system itself, so I can actually feel like I'm doing something creative on my part, aside from me doing this on my own, which I love, but professionally I want to kind of push myself to do other things with the podcast. Alright, so like I said, I'm going to be doing another podcast in another day or so to do the reviews of Jurassic World and Ant-Man, and that's about it. I'm hoping everyone's enjoying the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, Mr. Gene. Again, things will get better for all of us. So, that's it. That's all I can say, except that you're listening to the Monster Sci-Fi Show. Sci-fi from a certain point of view. Good night, everyone.